Hey guys, welcome back to my another video. This video is going to be about the JavaScript crash course. So in this video, I'm going to go for JavaScript all the way from basic to the intermediate level. So the people who already know a JavaScript, I think it would be easier for them just to get as like a refresher video. But people who does not know a JavaScript can go this in a deep level as well. So the first thing I will just give you a little introductions about what is the JavaScript, and JavaScript is basically the high level interpreted programming language. What that it really means is JavaScript will not compile at the time of running the code. The difference between the JavaScript and the backend languages such as like a Java and C Sharp, they are the compilation language, so they will be a compile at the time of running the code. But for this JavaScript, we doesn't need a compiler. And also for the Java and JavaScript are completely two animals. JavaScript, which is a work in the front end, but it could be also work in the back end using a node server. But in the Java is basically which is used for a backend language for a server side. And the JavaScript is a ECMAScript specification. There are a lot of languages are the ECMAScript specification. One of the popular ECMAScript specification is a JavaScript language. JavaScript is a multi-paradigm. That means the JavaScript is can be written as an object-oriented language, and also it can be written as a functional language. Yes, the JavaScript is used for a client side, and it could be also used for a backend side using a Node.js, which is running on a Chrome V8 engine. But in this course, we will only go for our front-end side of the JavaScript. So there are the many more advantages of using a JavaScript. The first thing is a client-side validation, manipulating of HTML pages. If there is something on HTML, then you want to changing a color or you want to do something, we could do a DOM manipulation, which we're going to cover on this video. And the user notification, if something has happened, just pop off stuff like that. It could be done by JavaScript. And the backend data loading is using user Ajax for getting some data, such as like in a JSON, the most popular one. So because of the JavaScript, we could able to provide a very good user interface for the users as in a web pages. And yep, JavaScript can be also used for server applications, but we're not gonna cover that tutorials on this video. So in this course, we're gonna learn about the variables, data type. We're gonna talk about the array, object. We're gonna go for the string, array, object. We're gonna go for basic fundamental, loop, condition functions, and now later on we will touch base on the OOP. And at the end, we're gonna go for a DOM manipulations, events, and lastly the basic form validation. Now let's get jump to the code and let's get started with the crash course. Let's get started on the coding. I am here in a Visual Studio Code. If you guys didn't know what is a Visual Studio Code, then you can search on a Google the Visual Studio Code and you can download it. It is an editor which is built by the Microsoft. So you can download easily on your machine, or whether you are using a Windows or Mac, you can download it and you can install on your machine. And once you install it, then you will see something like this. What you can do is you can click on file, open folder, and create one folder where you want to just open that project. I created a folder called crash course, which I'm opening here. So I'm hoping that whoever watched this video already knows some basic HTML and CSS, because this is a basic JavaScript course. So you might guys know already the HTML and CSS. So in HTML, what I do is I just go and type HTML and it will give me the boilerplate. HTML and tab, and it will give me the boilerplate of the simple HTML page here. So once I have HTML page loading here, I'll just do a test. So here is my file. It's called index.html. I also installed the extension called live server. So just go in this extension and install something called live server, and this will run your project on your local device. Here, the live server. You just go here and install it. Once you install it, then what you can see is you can see on the bottom here something called go live. If you click that button on your opening this project, then it will open your project on a port 5500. So if you go in a port 5500 now, not 55,000, 5500, then you will see a test. The test is coming from your HTML page. So now the first thing what we're gonna do is we're gonna type here the script. So now on a script, what we're gonna do is we're gonna write some JavaScript code. The first thing what we're gonna learn is about the alert. So when we type the alert here, so basically alert is a function. So in a function, we need to put a parenthesis. So inside the function, we'll just do a test and I'll just save it. Once I save it, then it will reload automatically. So it will give me a test. So we don't have to reload this page again and again. That's why we are using a live server. Here is also opening on my Edge. So I'll just close my Edge. So this is my Chrome browser here. So the another thing is, instead of writing the scripting on the HTML page, we can create a file called app.js, and we can call this app.js from our index.html. How are we going to call it? We just give here the source, and we're going to do app.js. I will remove the code and I will paste it on here. Once I save it, then it will reload the page again here, and we will see a test. So alert basically give you a pop-up. So alert is based on the Windows function. So if we do a Windows the alert, we could also able to use it. We're already on the Windows, so that's why we don't have to type a Windows again. We just need to type alert. It will work. So that's how the alert work. The another thing what we're gonna learn is about the debugger tool called console.log. If we type here the console.log, and if I do something typing printing here, then what we see, we just need to right click on your browser and inspect, or you can go on this button here, more tools, developer tools. You will see the console here is printing here right here. If you click this button, the setting, then you can also put your console on your the dock on the bottom, dock on the left, or dock on the right. I'll put on the bottom here. That's what I like it to put it. I can also type the control and mouse wheel up and down to zoom in and zoom out. So this is the console log that is printing. Whenever I refresh it, then it will print because we have printed ASDF here in the console log. There are more console log functions that what we can use in console. The another is what we can use is error. If there is error, then we can use a error as well. There is another one is a console.1. We can use a 1 as well. There are more we can use it. All gonna print a little different. I will show you guys here. The first it's printed ASDF with normally console.log. The error it will give you some error here, and this is a 1, then it just give you 1. If you guys want to read more information about the console how it give it, then it's on here. When you want to type console and MDN, the Mozilla Development Network. If I go it here, then I will see that here is a console log that is printing. We will see a more here, console log, debug, dir, more than enough. But in this video, we're gonna only use a console and log for this crash course. So now let's talk about their variable. I'll just delete everything and I'll just talk about the variable. There are three ways what we can create a variable in a JavaScript. The first one is a var, the second one is a let, and the last one is a constant. So what's the difference between the var, let, and constant? So var is a globally scope. If you declare a variable outside of the if, and if you declare inside, it might affect. So let and constant are defined in an ES6, which is also called ECMAScript 2015. So basically the let is a block scope. If you define the variable which is outside or inside of any of the block, that it will not affect. So it's better to use a let or constant instead of var. So now let's add it a variable here. Let's add a variable called food, and we have a food called pizza. So that's how we can declare the variable easily, and we can also do our console here now if we want to see it. So if I save it, it will automatically reload and we will see the pizza. So now what's the difference between constant? The constant is if I declare the food pizza, and if I want to reinitiate the food, that I could able to do it. Maybe I don't want to eat a pizza today. I'm a little hungry, so I will eat a burger. Pizza will also fill you up, but let's say I want to eat a burger. I'm a burger guy. So if I do a burger here, then I will see a burger here. So it will not happen on same thing on constant now. If we type a constant, and if we try to reinitiate the food again, it will give you an error. It says the assignment to constant is variable. We can only able to define only one time the constant. We can initiate the constant more than one. If you are final for this variable that you don't need to be reinitiated in the future, then you should use a constant. If you are uncertain about any of the variable that can be a reuse or not, then you can use a let. Okay guys, let's talk about the data type now in JavaScript. So the first data type is a strings, and in data JavaScript we have a numbers, and we have a boolean, we have a null, and we have undefined. We have a symbol in JavaScript as well, but we're not going to cover in this video because it's not going to use that much. So let's talk about the string. So how we can initiate a string is basically we just say that the constant name and the name of the string, such as Sam Llama. And we can also declare our numbers here. So numbers is going to be anything such as like a ratio 4. And in the numbers we can define it's integers or it's a double. So we can also define a double or number like this. For a boolean, we can say true or false. For a null, we can directly literally type like null like this. For undefined, we can do undefined like this. So null is basically we don't have anything inside the space, and undefined is it's not declared yet. In another word that we can also do undefined like this. We can check this all data type using a type of. We just do a type of and name. Once I do a control S, it's going to refresh a page and it's going to show up here as a string. The type of name is string. If I do a type of this ratio, then what's going to show up is a number. That's what we have. And type of is hungry. If I save it, shows as boolean. So if I do a control S on a space, the type of null is the object. So why it's null? Because in JavaScript you can say that the null is nothing but supposed to have something that does not exist. Unfortunately, in JavaScript, the data type of null is an object. So the data type of null in JavaScript is an object. So now let's go for our next one. If I go for X, the type of X is undefined, and it's undefined what we see, and the type of Y at the end. If I do Control S, then what we're gonna see is undefined here as well. So these are the primitive types of JavaScript. We have also the array objects, but array is an object in JavaScript, so we're gonna talk about this later on. So now let's talk about a couple of string. If I have a string like here, the food is something called pizza, and here is another call like it. Then if we want to do a concatenation in JavaScript, there is a older method which we can do, and the older method is basically a send plus food. That's the older method, right? That's the older method. If I do save it, then what we see, like it pizza. If we want to give some space, then we can use our single quote or double quote. It doesn't matter, just give a space and we could able to print it easily. So the another way of using the concatenation in a JavaScript for ES6 and ECMAScript 2015 is a template string. It's also called a string interpolation. So how we gonna do that? For that one, what we do, we just do a console log, and we will use something called backticks here. For a backticks inside, now we could able to use a dollar, and we will able to define the variable equal to or doesn't matter. We just do a dollar sign here and something called send, and if I save it, then what we see is pizza equal to like it. That's why how we print it. So this is the much easier and cleaner way to use the string concatenation in ES6 JavaScript. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the string method, which is provided in by the JavaScript. So what we're gonna do here, what we do is a console dot uppercase. We could do two uppercase to make this as a uppercase. If I save it, then what we see here, we will see here the pizza as a uppercase. Similarly, like uppercase, what we have another one is a lowercase. If I do it here, we will see lowercase. So another thing is if we want to know the length of this constant, then what we can do is we can do a foot dot length. And if I say it, then we will see a 5. So the another thing what we have is in JavaScript we have a substring method, and for substring we could able to provide the starting the index and the end of index. So it will modify our constant here. So constant is a a pizza, but what we see now, it will go from 0 1 and it will stop, so we will only able to see a p. So here pi as a p, so we will only able to see here p. We could also able to chain it if we like it. If we cannot do it a uppercase, then we could also able to do a uppercase here. Then pi will be a capital pi, so that's what we see. So the another thing is what we have here is the split functionality, split function. So what we need to do, we just need to provide what is the splitter of this. If we provide a space, then what is going to show up, it's going to show up there is no space, it's going to show up in the array. But if we want to split by each of this, nothing is here, then we will see the letters in an array. So basically the split will give you the array of splitter point, which is a very important in programming. If you want to read the Excel file using a comma delimiter, then we will do a split by using a comma delimiter, such as like if we have a comma delimiter array string here, such as like a pizza or a burger, right? Then we want to get the pizza and burger separately. How we can able to achieve it? Well, we need to do a split with a comma, and if we do a split with a comma, it will put inside the array here. So inside the array now we can do a bunch of things. So the another thing in a string what we have is we have a replace as well. So if I go for replace, and if I want to replace something here instead of pizza, right, I want to replace with something called bread, then I could able to replace as well. So if I do a food plus this replace, then if I reload it, then what we see the bread and burger instead of pizza and burger. So we could able to use a replace function to replace as well. So now let's go for the array part. Let's get started for the array. So basically the array is a variable that can hold a multiple values. So now in JavaScript, let's see how we can define it. So we can define using let var const, whatever you feel comfortable, you can declare it, you can use it. You could use a const here. For a const, I will create a food, and in a big bracket inside the food, I could able to define a variables here. So what kind of food I want? I want maybe the burger, right? Maybe the sandwich, right? Like that. So now it basically these two values are associated with this the variable called food, and this is defining as an array. So this is how we can define it. And then if we want to print this on the console log, so here is a two array. Basically it's a burger and a sandwich. So in any other languages, the index of the array is start from the 0. So as you can see in the screen here, the array, which is the index number which has a 0, which is associated with the burger, the value, and the another index number which is a 1, which is associated with the sandwich. So question is, can we print the values based on this index number in a screen? The answer is yes. Why not? So now how we can print it? So basically in the food here, what we're gonna do, if we want to print the value index number 0, then we just say that the index number 0 of the food. If we do it, then we'll see as a burger here. If we want to here index number of a 1, then we will see as a sandwich. That's how we could able to print it. So we could also able to redeclare the values if we like. So how we can redeclare the value is basically if we know the index number of this food, then we can definitely redeclare of it. So instead of the sandwich here, if I want to put something else, maybe the dumpling, right? Whatever you want, maybe the dumpling. Then if I check it here, now it says as a dumpling here because we are printing the values of the index 1. If I print it as a food here, so now what we see is we see a burger and dumpling because we overwrite the value of it. So this is how we can override the value of it. So the another question would arise here is basically I have declared the constant food, but how we can manipulate the values of it, right? So basically we are not changing the whole values of the array. We are only manipulating which is inside the array. That's why we could able to use a constant here as well. But if I use a constant here, not constant, yeah, maybe the food, right? If we use a food here and we will like to declare a new array, the empty array, now it will give me an error because I'm using the constant variable here. But if I use a let or var, then that will definitely work. All right. So constant is basically we couldn't able to declare on multiple times, which I mentioned before as well. So now let's see the couple of these functions of the arrays what we can able to do. So if we wanna push all the way at the end, we could able to push it using like use here as a dumpling. So if I push it, now it will show up as a burger, sandwich, and dumpling here. Burger, sandwich, and the dumpling. This is how we can use a push functions to add at the end. There is another way how we can add a push at the end as well. If we know the length, basically we always know the length of this array. How is basically if we do a food that length, then it will give us a length of it. If we want to add the end of this length, then we could able to use here directly as a dumpling as well. So this is another way that we could able to add a value at the end. If I comment this out, then it will definitely add at the end of it dumpling because the food that length will basically give me the how big my value is in the array. So if I check it here, it's give me a 3, y3 because I have here 1. Here is 2 and this is a 3. If I comment this out, then we will have only 2. If I check it here, then it shows me a 2. So now let's talk about a couple of more functions of the array, which is provided by a JavaScript. We talk about the push. Now let's talk about if we want to push something in the front, then how we can do it. Then we can use unshift functions. If I use as unshift as a dumpling, then it will push at the beginning of it. So if I put a dumpling here, if I print a food, then I will see here as a dumpling, burger, and the sandwich. Okay, so we have seen that if we want to add at the end, then we will use a push. So I'll just say that. But let's assume we want to add in the middle. Then how we can do it? To add in the middle, what we do is we use a splice functions. Splice what we have. We need to provide the what is a starting number. How many we want to delete it. If we don't want to delete it, then we can put a 0 on it. And later on, we can provide the value of it. So now here in the splice, what we can do is maybe we will add it here in the middle. So what we can do, we will add a value in the middle. So that it's in the after we will add the value of 1. So after 1 you have a burger. So we will add right here. So we want to delete any of it? No, we don't want to delete it. Then what we do is we'll use as the value of it here. If I save it, then we will see a burger, dumpling, and a sandwich. Burger, dumpling, and sandwich. That's how we can able to add a middle. Using a splice function, we could also able to add an end if we like. So how we can add an end? So basically, we will tell them, okay, after length of 2, we will not delete anything, and we will add a dumpling. So now it will add at the end here. That's how it ends.
But if we want to remove this sandwich, then we can remove it as well using a splice functions. We just say that, okay, after one, we want to remove one value, which is basically a sandwich. We want to remove it, and we want to put as a dumpling here. If I save it here, here is a burger dumpling. So that's how the splice function works. Now let's talk about how we can remove the values here. Of course, we can remove it using a splice function as well by adding the values here, but we can remove any other function as well. But we are using a shift. If we want to remove the first one, then we'll use as a shift. If I do a shift, I just see a sandwich here because I want to remove the first one. If you want to remove the last one, then how you can do it? There is a function called pop that you can use it, and this will remove the last one. Basically, we have a burger and sandwich, and here is burger. So let's comment this out. So basically, I will print the console log all the way in the front. So that's why we will see the values of the array. Okay, looks good. Before we go ahead, I would like to let you guys know for using a splice function, we could also able to remove an element in an array. So here, what we do here is a food splice. So basically, it's 1 and 1. So basically, what we does is from the 1, which is a sandwich, it will remove the sandwich and it will add a dumpling. So if I do it here, then it really add a dumpling here. So if I printed out the food, that's how it does. That's how I showed it before, which is perfectly fine. But let's assume I really want to get rid of the sandwich. I don't want to add a dumpling too. Then I just want to remove this, and we'll just use this one and one, and it will remove this sandwich. If I want to remove the burger, then we just said, okay, start from the one, and it will go up to one. So now it will remove the burger. So now we will only have a sandwich. So we could also able to remove the element in the middle of the array using this splice function. So this is how we can able to do it. I'll just comment this out like this. And before what we have another example here where we can add removing the element and we are overriding of it. So this is another one how we can use it. So now let's talk about the splice functions. So this is what the slice functions. So we have in an array, we have another one function called slice. So what it really does is slice will give us a new array. So if I want to get a new array here, so in the slice, if I hover it, it says that we will provide a start number and we will get the end number. If we provide a start number and end number, it will give us a new array here. That's all it's doing it here. So if I do it here, so in a slice, what we do, the starting number, let's assume that if we go from all the way from the beginning here, which is starting from here, it's a 0. So we'll just use it as a 0. And maybe we will stop it here, which is a 1. So what we do is it's a 1. So it's always easy to think like this. There is a car, right? There is a racing car. It's coming from here, and it's now is a 0 point, and we will put as a 0 here. And in the racing car is go up to after bracket was 1, then there's a 1. So now we will only able to see a burger in this new array. If I check it here, yep, is a burger. Now again, let's assume the racing car is going up to here, but the racing car is start from the here. Then what we do is we'll do a in here 1, and if we do a 1 here, and the racing car will in here. Maybe we could do a 2 here as well. If I do a save it, now we will see a sandwich. So it's easy to think there is a racing car going on in the array. So we will just easily can use the number here. And if we would like to make a copy of this all this array, then we could also able to use a slice function of it. If I use here, right? If we don't want to use any of this variable, then it will definitely copy the all this new array in a new here as well. So if I do it the new food here, then what we see is it's here. And so now let's talk about the reverse of the array. Can we do a reverse of these collections? Yes, we could able to do easily a reverse using a reverse function. So we have an array in JavaScript. The array provide a reverse functions here. If we do a reverse and if we check the food, then the element of this array would be a reverse. So there is another function. So what we can use here as a join. If we want to join this all the element, then we could also able to using a join functions. If I use as a food as a join and a join, maybe we want to join as using the a and the and I'll just comment this out. So now it will join this all this element using the and. So if I check it here, of course it will give us a new values here, basically the join value. So if I check as a join value, then we will see as a string here as a join values, right? Burger and sandwich. So we could also able to use join. And another one is let's talk about a sort. Yeah, we could also able to do a sort in array in JavaScript. If I do sort, then it will do our alphabetical sorts here. It's already does the alphabetical sort at this point. So let me add something here called apple juice at the last. So now apple should come in the front here. So if I check it as a food here, if I print it out, then yes, we will see as an apple burger and sandwich because we sorted it out using. So that's how we could able to do a sort. For a numerical also it will work. If I do here as a 2 3 1, and if I do a sort, then it will also give me a 1 2 3. And if I put here 2.2 something like that, then yep, it will also work again. And if I do 1.1, if I save it here, yep, it does the sorting as well. So now let's talk about the join. If we have a two array, let's assume we have the counter. Let's say this is a counter, and we have another one called count, and we have here 22, 33, something like that. And if you want to join these two, you could easily can able to join in JavaScript using our concat functions. If we have this one, and it will give us a new array here. So basically it will give us a new array here. So if we have it here, then we can use a concat. So counter concat counter 2, then it will concatenate these two of this array, and it will give us a new array. If I check it here, yep, 3 2 is the same exact number. It will concatenate. There is another one what we can use in ECMAScript 2015 using a spread functions. Then we could also able to use as a spread function using a counter here, and we will add this as a counter through here using a spread, and this will also able to join this together and give us a new array. All right, now let's see how we can loop this array. So there is a standard the way what we can use a for here using an index number. We could also able to do a loop using this one. So I'm using a counter, the counter length. So basically start from the 0, it will do a 0 which is less than counter length, and it will increment with the 0 plus 1 and plus 2 like that. And we could also able to print it here, the element here. So basically it's going to loop this collection, and it's going to print the elements here. So instead of this array what we have a counter here. So if I save it here, yep, we will able to see a 3 2 and 2 point. Basically it will print like this, start from the index 0 1 and 2. This is the standard method how we can able to loop this as an array as a method. And we could also able to do a for each. If we do a for each, then we will use a counter here, and in a counter we could also able to use as a for each really. If I do as element, and here we could also able to get an index. So in here in the second parameter, we'll also give all the elements and index. Element is the values, and then there is the elements. Here the index number 0 3 is giving a printing. So we have another function in JavaScript what we can use using our map. So we could also able to use a map, and map is basically it will give us a new values, new array. If I want to change something here in the middle, if you want to change something here, right? If there is an object, which I'm going to talk later on, but if I want to change something inside it here, then yes, we could also able to use a map here. And the map, what we do is it will give a new values here, new array. Map will give us a new value here. Let's assume that if I want to change something here, like if there is any number of the three, right? If there is any number of the three, if the number 3 has been found, then what we really want to do is we want to change the, instead of number 3, we want to put this as a number maybe 1, right? We just want to put number 1. We don't want number 3, then we could also able to using it this way. And here after it changes, yes, we need to return it here. So when we do it, then if I printed this new array, the new array what we have, it will change the values of it. It will change the 1 2 and 1.1, 1 2 and 1.1. Oh, I need to return here as well, sorry guys. So if I do it here, here's a 1 2.2 and 2.1 here. So that's how it's going to change it. It's going to change the values and it's going to return. So that's how the map is going to work. The another one what we have in this here in JavaScript also provide the filter functionality. So if I go in a filter, here's the similar like the map, but instead of the map we have you can use a filter here. But let's assume if the value of the d is 3, then we only want to return it the 3. We don't want to return the other one. We just want to know that the value of d will be a return. So if I print it out, then we will only able to see a 3. Yep, because we check that if it's 3, then we just want to return. If it's else, then we don't want to do anything. So basically the filter will filter it and it will give a new array. The map will loop all the collection. It can change. We can do a manipulate inside it, and we could able to get a new collections. So that's a difference between the map and filter what we have it here. Okay, so there is another function what we can use is every. So what we can do is basically we're gonna loop this the every of each of the element, and we're gonna check that if the condition is true or false. Let's assume here, right? We have a values number here, 3 2 1, right? So if the number is greater than 4, so this all is greater than 4. Yes, this all is greater than 4. Then we will get here the true and false values here using every function. So if I go here and if I do a values here, then we will see as a false because the number of this is not greater than 4. That's why we get a false. But we check that this all the number is a less than 4. Yes, I think we should get a true here. Yep, it does give a true. It's a very useful functions what we have here in the JavaScript using every function. So there is another functions in a JavaScript in an array. It's related to similar
similar like every, but we have something called sum. So what is a sum? If any of the condition has been matched, then it will give you as a true or false value. That's all. So now let's say, so if I go in console.log and if I print these values, right? And if we check that if there is equal to 4, any of this value is not equal to 4, so we will get as 4 true. How is creating as true? Oops, it's because the reason is I need to do a equal to sign. We could also use a double equal signs or triple equal signs. The triple equal sign is basically it will also match the data type of it. The double equal, it will not match the data type. So if I check that if any of these values is equal to 4, nope, so false. Yes. So if any of this value is equal to 3, then if I check it, yes, it's true. So it's going to give me a value. That's how this works. So you might ask, what's the difference between the sum and every? So the difference between the sum and every is in sum, basically, if any of this element has been matched, then we will get the values here. For average, each of these values should be a matched. So if I check it here, the every if d is equal to 1.1, which is I just tried 1.1, then what would be the value? It's matching, but it's not matching for each and every of the elements, so it should give me a false here. So if I check it here, yep, it does give me a false. But if I do it on this my sum like this, then it will give me a true because it's matched at least one. So if it's matched at least one, then it will give me a right. So what's the difference between the sum and every. So now let's see how we can check this is a really array or not. So to check that, what we can do is we can do array. Oh, the array is array. If array is a counter, then yep, if it's an array, then we will give it as a value as a true. So let's print this to say. I do a console log here. If I say it, and yes, it's give me a true because this is actually an array. But if it's not an array, then it will not give me a true. Let's assume I would put something here as a string values or the number is a string definitely. Then yeah, we'll say as a false. So that's how we can detect that if this is actual array or not. We could also able to get an index number of this array. How we can get the index number of this array? Oh, then what we can do is if we do a counter here, and we can use the index of. If we use index of 3, basically it's going to give me a 0. So let's see it. So index of a 3 basically will give me a 0 because we know the values and we just want to know what is the index number. Then we could also able to easily can get it using the index of. There is another one which is a last index of. So what the last index of does, so if I do a last index of 2.02, if I print it out, then we will see the 1. Well, that's return a same value, right? If I check in the last index of, it's return a 1, and if I do an index of, it return 1. So what's the difference between of those two? So the difference between of those two is if we have duplicate values, then what would give me a duplicate values? The index of will read from from the start from here, but the last index of will read from all the way from the back. So now we will find out that 2.2 is all the way on the back. So now we will give a value as a 3 because it start from 0, 1, 2, and 3. And if I do an index number with the same values of it, then what we see is we will get a 0 and 1, which is 1 here. So that's the difference between the index of and the last index of. So before I go ahead, I would also like to let you know that in index of or last index of, we could also able to use from index here for a second parameter. So what is the from index? So it literally says that from any of these values, if we want to skip it, if we want to skip this is 1, maybe we only want to go from here, then how we can do it is index of 2.2. Let's find it out after 2. So this is a 1 and 2. After 2, let's find it out. Then it will give me a value of index of is 3 instead of 1. So now we will see as a 3 because we're skimming it. So the both of the last index of and the index of we could able to use from index. Okay, so that's all I'm going to cover for about the array in this video. So now let's go for the object. And one more thing, if you want to read more about this array, then you can go in the Mozilla Developer Network and you can read the more functions and features of this array. So now let's see the objects how we can create in JavaScript. So basically how we're going to create is using declaring a variable here, and we can declare a property. What would be a name property of it and the values. It's a key value pair. So here what we have is ID, and we have ID1 and text, which is basically the dentist appointment and is complete, is not complete yet. That's how we can able to declare it here. So in the object what we have it here, we have the data type of the number, and we have the type of string, we have the type of boolean. We could also able to add a data type of the array inside it, or the inner object. If we maybe we will do a next week, right? We will do something called next week. Then we could also able to create the next week of the object which is inside the object. So basically we can also go inside the object of the object, or we could also put our array inside it. So maybe we'll put up array something called to-do list, right? Something called to-do list. It doesn't matter what would be at this time, but we could also create something called to-do list here.
So we have a object which is inside the array which is inside the object. Or we could also able to create a functions here if we like. If we want to get the text, something like that, then we could also able to create the functions which is inside the our objects here, inside the our objects here. Basically this is a fat arrow functions which I use here. Well, it doesn't need to be use a fat arrow functions. I can literally can use these functions here, which I'm going to show the how we can declare our functions later on, but we could able to use it like this and here. So now let's see the how we can print a value of this object. If I do a console log to do dot id, then I could able to print the id here. If I check it here, the id 1 has been printed because I can able to use a dot to print the values of this the keep here is completed. If I go for completed, then it's give me a false, right? And if I go for to-do list, now it will give me the array. And similarly, like if there's a get functions and this is a functions, so I have to use a parenthesis here, then I will able to get a test because that's what I'm going to return it here. I could also able to return the value from directly from here if I like it. If I do return this dot id, then I could also able to return the id here. If I check it, then it's going to return. So you need to use a this because this will be inside these of the functions. That's how we can able to return it here. But in most of the cases, there is an array which has the object which inside it. That's what we're gonna do on this. So basically, let's assume that we have the array, and in the array we have a couple of the objects here, maybe a couple of to-do lists. This is, let's assume this is my to-do list. So I have a to-do list for ID1 and ID2, right? Maybe if for instead of this appointment, maybe we'll do a meeting, something called meeting, right? Now we have a two objects. Now how we can print these objects values? So if I print a to-do, now it will give me the array. So if I check a to-do, then it will give me the array. I already covered the array. So array is a start with the index of the 0, and here is the index number which is a 0 and 1. And but instead of this, we have a primitive types of value now. Now currently what we have is we have objects value. So how we can print the each and specific object, or we can how we can able to get this value. So the easily what we can do in we have to use this brick bracket, and for index 0, now we have to tell that what data we wanted. Maybe we want a text. If I do a text, then it will print it out dentist appointment. So here is a dentist appointment. It will print off. If I go for index number 2, index number 1, which is basically it will give me the value from here. So now it will print as a meeting. That's how we could able to get it. So now we could also able to loop it this one, and we could also able to get it. So now let's see how we can do a loop in JavaScript. So there is a standard way we could able to use a for, and if I use a for, it Visual Studio will also suggest me here to use it just using a tab that you will be able to use it. Just go for this, and maybe the second one, I guess there it is. It can also provide you directly samples of the how the for loop is using it. So this is a standard for loop. It's using any other programming languages. So the index is start with the 0, and if the 0 is less than the length of this to-do list, the length of to-do is 2, so it's going to loop from index 0 and 1, that's all, and it's going to increase the index here. So here to length of the index, here in the element, now what we get it, we will get the object here. If I print the element, now it will print the two of the elements here. So the first one is dentist and second one. So if I want to print directly a text, then we could also able to print it here, text of this two, because it's looping it, so we could able to print it here. And I already cover for each loop on the array part, but for this one also, this is also an array, but what we have is we have an object which is inside the array, so we could also able to use a for each here. So if I do a for each, for instead of this to do for each, then in the element it's gonna print the same exact. If I do here element text, then it's going to print the exact same thing. So I'll just comment it out and save it. So if I check it here, it's going to print the dentist appointment and a meeting, and it's going to loop this two, and it's going to show up here. Now let's cover a while loop also here inside this array, because we are using this array and we could also able to do a while loop. So now let's see how the while loop we could able to use it in JavaScript or inside the array here, of course, and the object. So in a while, what we do is this is a standard while loop. So if I go for here the let number, if I know my number is start from the 0, and if a number is less than 10, and of course we need to make sure that number is increasing every time, so it will be stop here. This is a condition that what we provided in while loop. So now if I do like this, and if I save it, then it's going to print from 0 to 9 here, all the way from the 9, because it's we did a less than than 10. We could also able to print our object which is inside the while loop. So what we have a to do here. So we know that what is the length of this to do. So we can get using the to do that length. The number is increasing from 0, which is perfectly fine. So in a number, basically this is going to be an index instead of number. We could give any name. We can provide a number as well, but I just use as an index here now because looping as an index number. So now here in the to do, I'll just create as to do, and inside the to do now I'll put has an index. Now it's going to print the two objects what we have it here, which is dentist and a meeting. And of course now it's the same process. We could also able to get the values of the each and everything. Like here is a dentist and meeting, and it's exactly work like on the bottom one. So this is how the while loop is work in JavaScript and can work inside the array.
Okay, so now let's talk about the do while as well. So now how the do while will work in JavaScript. So basically it's the same standard the syntax that what also used in other programming languages. So what we do is for the do, so basically we will do the work here until the condition will be met. So the condition we can define on a while here. So that's what the do while is. So now let's see here. So if I put here the index number is start from 0, and we will increase the index stop every time here. So we just need to make sure that what would be the condition of our, if our index is less than 5, then it's going to print us a 5 time here. So if I do here the console log on the top of this index, so now if I save it, if I check it here, now it's going to print from 0 to 4, 5 time course. So it's exactly doing the while loop here at the bottom, but it will use as a do at the first. And now we could also able to use the our array inside the do while loop if we want to. So now how we can use it. So this is our to do array. So for that one, what we do here for index we have already here. So instead of 5, what we do, we with a length of our to do, and in a console log basically we'll just put here the index. Now it's going to print our two objects here. There's 1 and 2, and index here, of course we could also able to get each of these values here. Now it's going to print as the dentist appointment and the meeting. So that's how we can able to use or do while loop in JavaScript. Okay, so we covered the for loop here, the standard for loop, and this is a for each loop that what we cover. We also cover the while and do while. Now let's cover a couple of the for loop here. So there are the other ways of the for loop what we can do. We can do a for of as well. So basically the for of will be a similar like a for. It's gonna loop the array here. So if I put here the array in the iterator, basically it's going to print here the elements of it. So it's going to print out the element of it. Yes, it doesn't have an index number, but if you want to put an index number here, you can create your variable index like this, and you can do an increment here. But instead of using an increment like this, it's better to use a standard one or a for each. In a for each also, we will able to get the index number here in a second parameter. We could able to get an index number. If I missed to tell you guys, I think I mentioned this on the array video, but we could also able to get the index number here. If I do console log save it, now we will see here that the disappointment is the index number is printing right here. Okay, so now let's talk about the for in as well. So for in, let me create one object here. So this is called test object. So I'll just copy this objects here and I will paste it here. I need to have objects for in. So we have a for in function which is provided by our JavaScript here. For a for in, if I check it here, so basically we're gonna loop our object instead of array. We can also loop the object if we like to. So we are looping this object called test, right? And if I do a for in here in the test, if I check the key, now basically it's going to print the key of this object, which is going to loop it and it's going to print each and every time. It's going to print the ID, text, and complete. So if I check here, it's going to print the ID, text, and complete. But let's assume I want to print a value, then how we can print a value? So it's pretty straightforward. The test is our object, and we'll just say that what would be our key, and this will print the key. And if we want to print both key and value pair, yeah, we can print it easily like this. So here is a key and a values pair. So that's how this key and value here can be a print using the for in for the object. Now let's talk about a couple of high order functions of the array as well. So I already talked about this high order functions in the array part for the primitive types, but let's do for the object as well. So for some couple of the high order functions like a map, filter, and let's do for a map first. So if I want to change the manipulate the values of this inside it, such as like now it's going to loop this all these values, and D is basically the objects here. So this is the object, this is a D here. So in a D, maybe let's assume that I want only the text. I don't want the ID, I don't want a complete. So basically what we can do, we can return a dot text. So now it will give us a new array here. So new array. So in the new array, what we see is we only see the collections of the text, not the collections of the ID and the
complete. So if I print it like this, so we will see here the collections of the text as I mentioned, which is basically the dentist app and the meeting. So that's how the map is going to work. So I'll just comment it out. So now let's talk about the filter, how the filter is going to work. I'm going to copy the same code. So instead of this, I will just use a filter. So in the filter, basically, I also mentioned in the array video. So if the text, let's assume the ID is better. If we only want the ID is equal to 2, then what we can do is first we need to make sure that we need to check this using a if here. If we need to make sure ID is 2, then we will return the objects. So D is an object, so we are returning the whole objects. So if I use a D, then it's going to return our objects here. So here it is the array of this, which is only matching with the ID 2 that is returning. But let's assume that on this inside it, I just want the text. I don't want this ID stuff. Then I could also able to return using a text. If I do a text, I can only able to see the text inside it. Probably not. We wanna to see only the text. We need to use another one here. What we need to use? We need to use a map. To change any of the values, we could able to use a map here. So I can chain it here, which is a really cool for the high order function and for the JavaScript here. So I could able to chain it here. So now instead of it's returning a D objects here and map is going to return the text. So if I check here now, it's only returning a meeting of this array. So now it's doing a filter, it's returning the objects, and now it's mapping it and only returning a text. So that's how we can able to chain as well. This is how the filter and map will work. So now let's talk about the sort in a array in a JavaScript with the objects here. So if I do the console log, that's to do, and it's already a sorting. So if I do a sort, then it's gonna sort up. It's gonna sort this index with the index number here, 2 and 1. But let's assume if I have an ID number here, I have ID number 2, and I want to sort with the ID. Does it gonna work? If I refresh, yep, it does not gonna work. It does not gonna work because it doesn't know what to sort it. So for the sort one, we need to use a couple of the other functions. So sort will provide as the objects here. So it will we can use the compare functions. So basically, the in Java world also there is a comparable and comparator interface where we can do a compare each of the objects property, and we could able to sort it based on it. So using a same functions here, we could able to use it here in JavaScript as well. So if there is such as like if, so we're going to return here if the A is basically the object of the first one that is looping of it. So if A, which will return the ID, sorry, if the A is ID is less than A is equal to ID, B dot ID, then what we're going to return is we're going to return a -1 because it's going to return a -1. Else, if the A dot ID is greater than or B dot ID is, sorry, A dot ID is greater than B dot ID, then we're going to return a 1. Or if there is nothing like that, then we're going to return a 0. So this will basically do a sorting based on the ID here. So if I do the everything correcto, yep, now instead of these are to do, so for a to do's now instead of this it will be a sort based on the ID here. So here it's ID1 and ID2 is sorting based on the ID. Yeah, I could also able to sort based on the text if I like it. So instead of this ID, I just need to change it as a text. So if I do as a text here, so now it's going to show up the, of course, the ID2 at the first. See ID2 at the first because I'm sorting based on the text here. D and M, these come before after the end. So this is how we could able to do a sort in a JavaScript for the array in an object. So that's all for the objects for the video. There are you can also read on more informations in the MDN Mozilla Developer Network about the object. So now let's talk about a couple of the fundamental part. So fundamental part, let's talk about first is how we can use a if and else. So if I do here constant is equal to num is equal to 10, and if we want to check if num is 10 or not, then we could easily can check it. If the num is 10, then we could able to print here. So we can able to check like this. If I check the values, the value is a 10, so it's can checking it. And if we can also check that the num which is a greater than 1, so the 10 is greater than 1, yes it is, so it's going to print this here. If it's not is greater than 1, then we could also able to print at the bottom here. All right, we can also say that's less. If something is here, something 15, right, num 10 is greater than 15, nope, so it's a less than 10, so we're gonna print it here like this. We can also able to use an or, and we can also able to use a or. So for or we will use the two pipe key here. So for a pipe key we can check that if the number is greater than 10 is greater than 15,
which is not true. But let's say that if the number is less than 10 is less than 12, then it's going to go for the first one because it's matched these values, so it will go for the first one, value 10. So this is how we can use the OR operator. We could also use the AND operator using a two and % sign here, sorry, the key here. So now it's need to match up both of these values. If the both of this value is true, then we will see it here. Otherwise we will see a less here because nothing is matched, so we'll see a less than 10 here, so it's going to go here. That's how we could able easily can use the if and else on the. There is another one also. Of course, we could also use a if inside the if. We could also able to do that if we like it. So the another one what we have is we have a if else as well. So it is basically if and else is using, but after else we could also able to provide a condition here if we like. If we said that if the norm is equal to 10, then we're gonna go is here as a equal, not less, equal to 10. Then we could also able to use else here on the bottom here. Instead of this, we could also able to use if here. So now it's going to stop it on the middle here in equal. If I check it, is going to stop in the middle of the equal. So let's go from the all the way from the beginning. I'll just remove this one as well. If 10 is greater than 15, nope, it's not, so it will not go. But 10 is equal to 10, yes, it is. Then it goes up to here and it stop it here. We could also use an if and else like this. So there is another one called ternary operator, which we can able to use easily. In ternary operator, basically it will give us a value here as a flag values, and we can check here if the norm greater than 10, our name is greater than 15. The 10 is greater than 15, then we can provide using a question mark. Now the value will be returned here. So it says we can. So basically now what we have, if the norm is greater than 15, then it's going to return the 10 is greater than 15. If it's not, 10 is less than 15. So basically what we have here on the value is going to print is 10 is less than 15. So if I go it here, the 10 is less than 15. Of course, the number is not greater than 15. The 10 is not greater than 15, so it's going to return this one. This is how the ternary operator works. We could also able to use the switch operator if we like it. If I go for a switch operator, then let's talk about how the switch operator works. So basically, we have a color here. Maybe the color. So on a switch operator, maybe we'll provide the values here. And what we do is we write a case here. The case of if the case is red, then we're going to return something here. So we can return it here, or we can also do a break here. It's better to do a break. Let's break it. And here now we could able to do that color is red. This is how the switch operator work. If I printed another one, and if I threw here as a instead of the red. So instead of red, we have a blue, then the color is blue. So it's going to stop and it's going to print it here. Color is red. If I changes the color to blue, then it's going to print as a color to blue. So what happened if it's not matched with anything? If it don't was matched with anything, so we could use as a default here. Default, so color is not matchable. So if I the color is not matchable, I don't need a break here at all because this is the last one. So if I check it here, color is blue. If I put something here, whatever the thing, then the color is not matchable. That's how the switch works. So now let's talk about the functions here. To declare of functions, we could able to use as of directly of functions and add norm. If we haven't we want to do some summations of the two numbers, then what we can do is we can do a sum of this and like this, and we could able to do or easily can return num plus for num2. If I do a console log and add num for the, and we can provide the value, then it's going to give us a 3. So if I check it here, it will give us a 3 here. So let's assume it will only provide a 1, then what will happen? It will not work. It will give me not a number. So but for this ES6, what we can do, we can also literally says that, okay, if there is no value has been provided, then we can provide here the 10, the default value. So for default value, now it's give me a 11 here because the default value is a 10, and this is a 1 what we provided, and this is became optional values that we can use it here. As you can see, if I hover it, then you can also see that after the number 2 there is a question mark, which is defined as an optional value. To make it better of these functions, we could also able to use a fat arrow keys here instead of this. So I can remove this one and this guy, and instead of this, we could also able to use a fat arrow key function. So for fat arrow key function, instead of the functions, we'll define as a constant here. So when we define as a constant here, and we need to declare as an equal to sign. So basically now it's become a constant functions. So in the functions we will provide this, and now it's become a fat arrow key function, and it's going to work
work exactly the same one. It's going to print as 11. If I change it as a 2, and 2 plus 10 was 12, so if I click it here, then it's going to show up as a 12. We look before the object literals on that on our video. So now let's look the how the object can create using our functions as well, using a constructor. Okay, so this is basically this is going to be a constructor function. For that one, what we do is we create a functions, and we say, let's say this is, would be a class, or the objects of the blueprint template. That's how the class has been defined. So this is the classes, and classes will have a name and DOB. So that's all how we can define it here. For a date of birth, let's assume that we have a date here, and we will pass here as a date. So for that one, what we can do now is we can declare the objects here. For a constant of the person 1, let's assume we have a new person. So we can define as a new person. Now we could able to provide the name of this guy. Maybe this guy, the name of this guy. So I will provide here as a Henry. So for a Henry, now I will provide as a date of birth. So now our first object has been created. I could also able to print this, how to look how it's gonna show up in a console log. So here is a person, that what we see, because this is our the class. This is our the objects of the classes, and here is the date of birth, and this is a Henry that has been created. I could also create another one. Instead of Henry, maybe I'll use a David here. So here I use a person 2 as a David, and if I check it, print it out David, then it's going to show as a David using a person here, because that's how the constructor function is using it. So basically it's a class that's using it, and this is the old method, but I will also show you how we can using a class of the ES6 syntax. So you could also able to define the functions which is inside the constructor functions here, which is the classes. What we have is a person. So I'll define as a get string. I can use a fat arrow key function, and maybe I'm going to return here backticks here concatenate name date of birth this the DOB. So now I created the functions called get string here. So how we can print it here for a person 2 here, we could directly get. So if I save it, then it's going to print this the date of birth. That is what we can print it here. If we check it here, if I only print the person 2, and if we check it in the console here, it's going to show the person here, which is the class your questions here. So it shows the DOB and a get string, but we have something called prototype. So prototype is basically it comes with, when we declare our functions, it comes with it, and we could also able to change our functions inside this prototype here. So instead of using the get string here, we could also able to create the prototype persons here. If I do a person dot prototype, now we could able to declare what we want to declare it here. We want get string. Yes, we can able to declare the get string, but if I use a fat arrow key function, and if I comment it out for now, then for a person 2, if I do as a get string, it will not work. I'll show you guys why it doesn't work, because it doesn't know what is this name, because the fat arrow key function, it will not work here. But fat arrow key function is inside this the functions constructor function called person, it will work inside it. The reason why is the fat arrow key function will go higher level of it. So the higher level of this is a person, so it already know what is the name and DOB. For a prototype, it doesn't know what is that. If you go for a higher level of this prototype, that's a window. So a window doesn't know what is the name and this. For this one, we need to use here the old functions way instead of the fat arrow key functions. If I use the functions for this one, then it will work here. David DOB is this guy. So this is how we can declare the of constructor functions and creating a person classes using the functions. But now I'm going to show you how we can using a class. This is a of the ES6 syntax what we have ECMAScript 2015. And so now let's go for the class base. So I'll just comment this out everything and just create a classes here. The class of what? The class of person, the blueprint. And here every class, if you come from the background from Java or .NET or any backend program, it's gonna be easy because it's going to be the same concept of the object oriented. So here what do I do is I just do the name and the objects, right? Name and DOB. Basically this is going to be the primitive type of this class is called the person. So now for this one, I'll just use exact the same syntax. I'll just assign it. So any other in Java or .NET, we need to declare here as a primitive type first, right? We need to declare as a primitive type, but in JavaScript, we don't need to declare it. We just say that that's all. So here I'm putting as a date. So now let's see that this will work or not. For a person 2, I'll just print the person 2, not get string, because we don't have any function called get string at this point. So if I print it out, then it's going to work as the same. It's going to print exactly the same thing. So now let's see if we want to add these functions here. Yeah, we can literally add these functions like this. It's straightforward. And yeah, we don't want this as a functions to be need to be created, we can literally say that get string like this. So if I do a get string like that, then yep, it's going to work. If I check here, then yep, they will be. So this is how we can easily can declare the functions and the classes. This is going to be a very basic of object oriented. So now let's go for the DOM manipulation part. So for DOM manipulations, I have already created the shopping list app here using the HTML and CSS. It's just one page of HTML using the Bootstrap for a fast deployment. So this is how the HTML and CSS look like. So now let's go for the DOM manipulations on this search here. So the first thing, let's learn that how we can get the elements, right? There are a couple of ways that we could able to get the element of it. This is the list. If I go here, then this is the list what we have it. So in the list we have the UL here. UL doesn't have any ID, so let me create one ID here for this. This is going to be my food list ID. So now I have a food list ID for you. So now let's get the ID here using document.getElement by ID. This is the standard way. So for that one, we just need to provide our ID name here, and basically this will give us the our food list. If I go list, so now if I print it out, so here you can see the UL has been printed out. So in the UL we have a strawberry that is in the li. So this is how we can able to select it. There is another way which is on ES6 syntax which we can able to use it is using the query selector. So if I go for a query selector, then we could able to use as a query selector as well. But in query selector, we need to provide what is it. For ID, we need to use a hashtag. For a class, we will use a dot. This is an ID, so that's why I use as a hashtag food list. So now if I print it out, then it's going to show up exactly this. So we could also able to use a class here. So if I go for index.html, we have a class called list group. So we can also able to get a list group here using the query selector. If I do here dot class as a query selector, then it's going to show me the results of the UL. If I refresh it here, if I save it well, and if I refresh it, then it's going to show me the UL of the food list group of this classes. That is it, what is showing it right here. So of course we could also able to remove if we like it. We could also able to remove using a remove functions. So if I click as a remove, then it's going to remove it. Undefined is going to show up, and we will not able to see it because we select the class and we just remove it. We could able to remove as well. So if I use for this class element, and if I have a multiple class, let's assume I have a list here for strawberry 1 and strawberry 2 3, and if I select this list group item class, and if I do this, let's go, then what is going to show up is it will going to show up us the node list, which we can able to loop it, and we could able to get the values of it. If I check it here, then if I refresh it, if I save it here, it's going to show up the first one, strawberry. It's not going to show up the third one. The reason why is we are just using query selector. We need can do a query selector all. So it's going to select the all this element that is has this list group item. So now it will give me the collection of a node list, which we could able to loop as well. So in here, what we can do, we could able to use a for each, or we could able to use interest key values. We could able to do a loop, and we could able to manipulate here. Let's assume, yeah, I only want to delete the first one, then I could able to do a d dot remove the first one. How we're gonna know? It's going to give me the index number here. So if the index number is maybe the 0, the first one, then we're gonna remove it, right? We can do that as well. So now it's going to remove the first one. It's just show me the strawberry 3. If I remove the second one, I can do this one as well. It's going to remove the second one. It's going to show me like that. So we could able to use it that way. So the another way how we can select the class name is using get the element by the class name. So here we put a get element by class name, and here we just need to provide our class name without dot. So this is will give me the our HTML collection. It will not give us a node list, but it will give us a HTML collection. The HTML collections will only able to give us the item and the length. So item length would be a 2 because there is a 2 collects 2 of this list available. And if we want to use the item method, then we could able to get it using our index number here. If I do 0, then it will give me our first one, strawberry, and if I give it 1, then
and it will not give us the for each loop, so we need to do a standard for to loop this collection of for, but in the node list part when we use a query selector and the selector. Okay, so that would be a difference. So we okay, so now let's grab the element, which is the first one. So I'll just put it here, the first one. So basically this is will be a UL list. If I show you guys the HTML, which I grab it at the before the foot list of the ID, so now it's grabbing as a you get the element by ID. We can also grab the query selector if we like it, but for this one now let's see that we want to change something else here. So instead of the strawberry, maybe we want to add something here later on, something different food item, right? So how we can do it? So basically from JavaScript we can easily can do it using the food list, and now this is would be the UL part. So UL has a two li, so we need to get the first one. So there is a first element child. So now for this one we can change the text content if we like it. So for text one content, maybe we want to change to banana, I guess. So I'll just save it. So now it changed as a banana. If I refresh, then yep, it's going to change as a banana because we are changing here as a text content as a banana. We could also able to add the CSS classes here. For that one, we'll use a class list and we'll use the add functions. So in a Bootstrap, we will have a class called text danger, which will give us a red. So now it's going to show me as a red here, red color, right? It's going to show me a red color. That's how we can able to. We could also able to use a inner HTML here instead of text. So in an inner HTML, maybe we could use something called h1, right? Show us a really huge of it text. That's what show up last. So I'll just comment out. It doesn't matter, but I'll just comment it out. Now it's going to show as a test one because we are changing the inner HTML of the first element. Similarly, like a first element, if we want to get the last element, we could able to get the last element child, and we can able to change that. But if it's in middle somewhere, then how we can able to get it is using another functions here. This will give us a children's here. So in the children's, now we can able to use the index number. This would be a first index. So if a first index, what we want to do, maybe we want to change the inner HTML to something else, right? I'll just comment this out. So this will be something else, fe something. It's going to change as a fe here. Even change for the second one, we could able to do it for fe2. It's going to show up fe2. So that's how we could able to manipulate. There are a lot of functions we could able to manipulate a DOM, which are defined in a Mozilla Development Network. You guys can go and check it out there. So now let's say that the button here. So in the button we have a class called btn, and this would be at the button. So maybe I'll create a button for btn something for the ID. So let's grab the button here. So let's change the something for button. Maybe the color of the button. Then can we change it? Yes, of course. For the one we could create a button here and document, because we are selecting using a query selector. Let's use a query selector at this time. So if I use a button, so now it will give me a button here, right? So now this will give me a button here. So for the button one, what we wanna do, we wanna change for button one, maybe we wanna change the color. Or we can also use a class name to change it, like it one add. We could add another class list here called btn.primary. Instead of btn primary, I can do a btn, then going to override it. Check, let's see, show up here. So here now btn and btn then z. Btn primary is basically the another color, but let's assume that we want to put it something, we don't want to add it, we want to override it. Then how we can override it? So for the overriding, we can also use a set attribute classes here. For set attribute, we can set the attributes of it. So for that one, we'll begin something called now the success. We want to use something called success. So if I save it now it's going to show success here. btn success. So spelling is a mistake that show up color here color btn success instead of btn primary. The btn primary is the original one what we have it here. That's why it's going to show up the blue color of the book. Okay, that's how we can able to change the color here. Another way, we could also able to add a style here. So if I do a btn.style, and if I btn.style, and if I want to change something called background color, then we could also able to use a style directly here. If I save it, so now the background color will be here. As you guys can see, the style background color is setting as a gray. So this all are the how we can set up. So do some. Okay, so let's get started for our DOM manipulations here. So we have HTML here, right? And in HTML, what we're gonna do now is basically when we add a new values here, so we're gonna show up in the list here. So in the list, what we have is strawberry and strawberry 3. This is going to be our shopping list app. So we are adding a food in our shopping list here. It's pretty straightforward, but we're gonna do everything in a pure JavaScript here. for manipulating a DOM. So as I mentioned, I already created this form using the bootstrap here, using just adding the link here and a couple of the CS2 CSS, only that much. And this is on one screen. I'll put this below this video so you can easily can download this HTML file. And in HTML file, now we're gonna write a couple of JavaScript here. So the first thing what we're gonna do is whenever we click the button, then we wanna make some that event is happening here. So for that one, we're gonna do a document and query selector. We're gonna do our query selector and we're gonna select using the our ID. And I just want to know what is my form name is. So this is my form here. So here is my form and we have our input values here. And my form is called, my form has an ID called my form. And make sure that we have an input field called name is very important, because if we want to grab using the form, then in our input type or any of the select whatever the values getting element must have a name value, otherwise it will not work. So for that one I will use as a my form and create it here constant as a my form. So whenever my form will be a submit, so we need to create an event handler for this. So I'll create a add event handler, and add event handler going to be as submit. So whenever this is going to submit, then it's going to return on maybe the fat arrow key functions here. Okay, so here what we're gonna do is it's going to return an event. So I'll just going to put this as an event here. So now we need to grab the values from the form from the input field. So what we can do is we will create a form data here. All right. So this would be our form data, and this is a JavaScript form data. So in a form data, we will pass it. We will pass that event dot target. So it will pass the element. So now form data will get each of the element of it. So we need to get the values from this form object. So how we can get the values? So basically maybe we'll get a form data props. Let's say the form data property. That's what we are trying to get it. So for that one, we will use as an object dot entries functions and we'll pass the form data. So now in a forms data properties we will able to get the values. So if I click the button, then I could able to get the value. Before I click the button, what happened if when we click it now, let's say that if we click it now, then it will automatically or refresh the page, because it's going so fast it just refresh the page. So we need to block it. To block that, how we can do is we can do our event dot prevent default functions. So now it will block our form to refresh it. So now if I click it, it will not just refresh it. So now if I click it the save, as you can see, we will see the empty array. So we see an empty array. The reason why is I use here the entries. I should use a form entries because I am getting from the form entries. So now if I click it here save, now we will get the food, because our the name that what I provided here is the food for the input type. That's why we are getting as a food here. But the value, we're not getting anything because we didn't put any values. So if I put ASDF whatever, then it's going to show up here the values as an object. So this is the key and this is the value. So now we already know the values, but let's do some validations here as well for a form data. So I know that what would be the key. The key is food. We can also use a destructing here using the curly bracket food. We can also able to use like this instead of using a form data prop dot food. We don't have to use that. In ES6 JavaScript we could literally use the food here. So we just want to make sure that if there is no food, then we want to give some alerts here, right? We are doing some validations here. For a validations, I already have the food is required validation, but it's hidden. If we check it here, alert danger, it display is null. So we just want to make sure, we just want to grab this and we just want to make sure that it's been enable it. For that one, yeah, I could able to create another function if I like. So another function would be maybe the show message. So in a show message, instead of functions, I can also able to do a constant here, doesn't matter. So in the constant has the fat arrow key functions here. So in a show message, basically it will provide the message here and we're gonna show this message. For that one, we need to grab the element first using our query selector, and the element has the class called alert. So now it will give me the single element of single alert element. So now the first thing I need to show this. To show this, I just need to change the style of it. So the style should be a display.
So for that one display, I could do a flex so it can show it. So after it show it, I can also chunk the message here, but it already has a message. If I check it here, yeah, it already had a message, so no need to provide this message. We just say that show alert maybe instead of message. So now this will be give me a alert. Like maybe we could also do like after like couple of seconds, maybe a 1 second, we will make them, we will hide it up. So we can do as a display none. So use set out functions after 1 second it's going to hide. So okay, so now let's call this show alert. So if I click it here, yep, so it will show. Now after 1 second it just hide. We can also raise raised it. Now it will give me a little longer here. The food is required. So now let's see what happened if the food has been added. So I'll create another functions here. If the food is added, right, this will give me a add. So maybe the add or we will provide a food. So if the food is added, so basically now we need to add in our UL item. So let's see what is the, so here in the UL we have the food list, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab this first, the food list, and now this will be became of my food list element. So I don't want to do this. Now in food list element, what I wanted, I want to append it. Here we can also use the append child. We'll append the child label. I append test, and it might not work. It will not work. It will give me an error, I guess. Oh yeah, it doesn't even call. So I need to call this add here. Add here first. Add food. Okay, so now if I it give me an error, of course. So if I click it here, yeah, append child is now working. Oh yeah, I also need to return here. So it doesn't go, if there is a alert, then it will stop it here. It will not go on the top on the bottom. So now if I click it, yeah, it will not go here. But if I put the values, if I save it, it will give me the error here. The reason why is append child will require a node element required. So we need to create a node element for it. Let's create a li element for that. So for that one, let's do a document create. Let's create the element called li. So, but in li we have a class also. We have a bootstrap class. So let's add that class. So basically, I will just as a class list and append add. So what would be the class list? Grass list. So it's ready to go. So now we need to add the value of it. So we can also add a text content. Yeah, because it's not HTML. So I'll use the text content here. So I'll add the text content as this. So the element is ready. So now I just need to add this element here. So now that's it. It's almost, yeah, it's ready already. So now if I put here something else, then it will show up in the middle and the bottom here. So it's pretty cool. It's gonna show up. It's gonna add up directly here. Of course, we can make this as a fixed height and we can put as a scroll here if we like. Yeah, we can do that. But the thing is now, let's say that if we save it, then this is not clearing up. So how we can clear it? It's pretty straightforward. So in a my form, basically, I just want to do a reset, reset. Okay, my form is reset. So after it's submitted, it will reset the form. Yep, it just reset the form. I hope you guys like my crash course. If you like my videos, please do subscribe and like my channel. And thank you very much for watching, guys. Bye for now.